Hi and welcome to the new series. Well, it's not a series yet. It might be a series if you like it. Basically, every once in a while you ask me questions, and these questions seem to repeat themselves. And one of the most popular questions is, what car should I buy? So I'm going to try to answer this question today. Today I'll focus on new cars, not second-hand cars. Second-hand cars, it's something I'll reserve for the next review, possibly, if you like that. So anyway, here's 5 points that you're going to have to take into consideration when buying a car, a new car, and not a bicycle. This bicycle, this is going to come in handy in a moment. Point number 1, general assumptions. You have to ask yourself, who are you buying this car for? Are you going to be driving it, or perhaps your partner is going to be driving it? This is an important question. Another question is, what are the functions of this car? Is it supposed to carry larger items, maybe your kids, maybe your bicycle, or is it supposed to be something fun, like the MX-5 here? And another question is, how long are you buying the car for? Because depending on that question, you may have to take resale value into consideration. Point number 2, and that's budget. How much do you have to spend? How are you going to finance your purchase? And, well, you have to remember, this is going to be a constant position in your monthly budget for some time. You have to take into consideration things like maybe the leasing or loan installment, maybe local taxes, some eco incentives or taxes depending on the type of car you're buying, insurance, fuel, all that kind of stuff. You have to sit down with pen and paper and you have to calculate it. How long are you going to be driving it for? What routes are you going to be doing? So whether it's a diesel or whether it's a petrol, etc., etc., etc. There is some calculation involved, unfortunately. Point number 3, you have to decide on the segment that you're going to go for. Whether it's going to be a 2-seater, maybe if it's going to be a little tiny sports car, but a 4 or 5-seater, a hot hatch, or just a regular hatchback, or maybe something bigger like the Toyota here. This is a D segment estate. Maybe you need something as big as that. Basically, based on your budget and your general assumptions, you should be able to sort of decide what are you going for. Point number 4, and that's the brand. How do you see the brand? Whether you see the Toyota as a reliable, wonderful car, or whether you see it as a car for boring people. How do you see the Mazda? Whether it's a hairdresser's car, or whether it's a cool little cheap sports car. That's up to you. Another thing is reliability. Japanese cars in general are perceived as reliable, and let's see, French and Italian cars, for reasons which remain obscure to me, seem to be considered as unreliable. But again, you want to check your reliability reports, which are usually available somewhere online or in printed automotive press. The next thing that you got to look at is the offer at a particular dealership, whether someone is giving you a good deal on the purchase, or maybe on service, or maybe on insurance. These are things that you also want to consider. And speaking of service, I like to have my service station close by so that I can take a walk rather than drive there or take a cab or go by bus. I could theoretically go by bike, but then I would have to have a bigger car, and I have a small tiny car, and this bike will never fit in there. And speaking of this bike, it's here for a reason, believe it or not. I'm not going to ride it, but I'm going to try to fit it into this big estate Toyota. And it's not as easy as you'd think. I've got this piece of towel here so I don't damage any parts here, but let's see how it fits. So, a big estate car, you say? Okay, so here's a bike, and as you can see, it's not all that easy to get it in. So if you are a keen biker, you have to take this into account. If you've got kids, go to the showroom with the stroller, with a child seat, with whatever else you have, and try to fit it in the car, because there may be 1 or 2 centimeters missing, and it's just going to be a deal breaker for you. And speaking of deal breakers, if you have twins, you definitely want to check how this big stroller, double stroller, fits in there. So anyway, here we are with the bike, and the next part of this point. We're talking about the personal factor. So the personal factor is whether the bike fits in there or not. Personal factor is whether you are comfortable in this car, because I can tell you a few pluses and minuses about the car. I can say it's got good cup holders. I can say that my back aches because I'm driving it. I can tell you that I am hitting my elbow every time I'm getting in and out. But these are my personal subjective things, and perhaps when you get in here, you'll be fine. Or perhaps you're 2 meters tall and you'll never fit in a car like this or that car. If you're 2 meters tall, your head will be about here. So that's useless, right? So you'll have to check whether you're comfortable in it or the person who's going to be driving it most often. And what about passengers? Perhaps it's your kids who have to get in and out. Perhaps it's maybe your parents or your grandparents that you're going to be carrying every once in a while. SUV is not necessarily the best choice for them because they have to lift their foot higher. And maybe you just want a minivan that you kind of sit down in like on a chair that's going to be more comfortable for them. And last but not least, speaking of the personal factor, is whether you like a given car, whether you like a Toyota or whether you like a Mazda or whether you like a bus or something, whatever. You have to decide what you like, and based on that, you have to make your own final decision. So if you find this helpful, give me a thumbs up. Let me know in the comments below if you bought a car or if you're planning to buy a car, and what things are important for you. If you want me to do more of these, let me know in the comments below. I'll try to answer your questions, how to buy a used car, how to buy an SUV, how to buy a whatever. Let me know in the comments below and I'll try to answer your questions. If you haven't done so yet, subscribe to my channel. New reviews every Friday, and these, well, we'll see how it goes. So I'll see you next time.